Imagine a fortress of gray concrete and steel, erected in 1934 on a barren rock and surrounded by the freezing, treacherous, and deadly currents of the San Francisco Bay. A place designed by the federal government with a single purpose: to be the most secure, impenetrable, and inescapable prison on Earth. A corner of hell designed to break the will of the most dangerous, cunning, and elusive criminals in the United States. For 29 years of operation, authorities repeated an unbreakable mantra: no one can escape Al Capone, no one can escape Machine Gun Kelly. Breaking through its walls was a guaranteed death sentence by drowning or sudden hypothermia in waters that rarely exceeded 12 degrees Celsius, striking with currents of up to 9 knots. Of the 36 inmates who staged 14 escape attempts throughout its history, 23 were recaptured, 6 were shot dead, and 2 officially drowned. But on the night of June 11, 1962, 3 men decided to challenge the laws of physics, military engineering, and human logic, staging the most spectacular, mysterious, and analyzed prison break of all time. A perfect escape that, over 6 decades later, still keeps its files wide open at the offices of the FBI and the United States Marshals Service. Welcome to Jon Crimes. Today we are not looking into a standard file of blood and serial killers. Today we open the official archives of a historical enigma that defied the pride of an entire government: the Great Escape from Alcatraz. The mastermind plot executed by Frank Morris and the brothers John and Clarence Anglin, 3 repeat offenders who proved that the human mind, when deprived of freedom, is capable of developing an absolutely chilling forensic and engineering genius. To understand the scale of this challenge, we must meet the brain of the operation, Frank Lee Morris. Born in Washington, D.C. on September 1, 1926, Frank's childhood was a true path of thorns. With an absent father and a 17-year-old mother who passed away, leaving him destitute, Morris became an orphan at age 11. He grew up in foster homes and orphanages, learning early on to survive on the streets through theft and violence. His first arrest came at the tender age of 13. Behind his appearance as a common criminal and his addiction to narcotics, psychiatric reports revealed a disturbing diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia and psychopathy, but also an extraordinarily brilliant mind. His IQ was over 133, placing him in the top 2% of the world's most intelligent population. Frank was a small man, standing at 1.70 meters tall, but he possessed an astonishing ability for technical drawing, mechanics, and social manipulation. He spent his youth in and out of state prisons for burglary and armed robbery, working internal jobs like repairing shoes or serving food to other inmates. Over the years, his audacity grew until he pulled off a major bank robbery in Miami and ended up in the dreaded Louisiana State Penitentiary. There, he used his intelligence to achieve something unheard of: escaping from the prison. Although he was captured a year later in the middle of another robbery, the federal government realized Morris was an escape specialist and decided to send him to the one place considered mathematically impossible to leave: Alcatraz. Arriving at the Rock in January 1960, Morris was stripped of his identity and his belongings. He was assigned inmate number AZ-1441 and, following the prison's relentless intake ritual, was forced to walk completely naked down the central corridor of the prison, ironically nicknamed Broadway by the inmates, while the rest of the prisoners watched, cheered, and mocked him. Frank was confined to Block B, Cell 138, a concrete coffin barely 2.5 meters long by 1.5 meters wide. In Alcatraz, life was regulated down to the millimeter. 12 surprise daily counts, a strict prison menu, and an suffocating visitation policy. Inmates only had the right to 2 hours of visits per month. Meetings were held through thick bulletproof glass, without any possibility of physical contact, and it was strictly forbidden to talk about life inside the prison or current affairs under threat of immediate isolation. But Morris did not plan to stay inside to die. In October of that same year, fate crossed his path with 2 old acquaintances from the Atlanta Penitentiary, the brothers John and Clarence Anglin. Born in Georgia into a humble family of 14 siblings, the Anglins were an inseparable pack. Since age 14, they accumulated arrests for theft, specializing in robbing banks using, interestingly, toy guns. Their most famous heist occurred in 1956, when they raided the Bank of Columbia in Alabama and walked away with a $19,000 bounty. After passing through Florida and Leavenworth prisons, they ended up in Atlanta, where they staged multiple frustrated escape attempts, which prompted their immediate transfer to Alcatraz. However, the brothers had a unique and secret skill that the guards completely overlooked. As children, every summer they migrated with their family to Michigan to pick cherries, and in the freezing waters of the northern lakes, they had become extraordinary swimmers, capable of crossing freezing currents with blocks of ice floating around them. They were the perfect men for Morris's plan. Alongside a fourth accomplice from the cell block, Alan West, the team began operating in absolute secrecy. For more than 6 months, the clandestine cell workshop operated without rest. Using discarded saw blades they found in the workshops, metal spoons stolen from the dining hall, and a homemade drill made from the electric motor of a broken vacuum cleaner, the 4 men meticulously chipped away at the concrete, corroded by marine salt, around their cell ventilation grates. To camouflage the deafening noise of the mechanical drilling, Morris played his accordion during the allowed music hour. Every day, at the end of the shift, they hid the structural damage with fake sections made of painted cardboard that perfectly mimicked the color and texture of the concrete. When the holes were large enough, the 3 men slipped through them to access a rear utility corridor, an unmonitored blind spot in the structure that they turned into their secret base of operations. Up there, based on a detailed technical drawing article they found in a library magazine called Popular Mechanics, they built a maritime arsenal unimaginable for a maximum security prison. They systematically stole and collected more than 50 rubberized canvas raincoats used by inmates and staff. Sewing the seams by hand with stolen thread and sealing them hermetically using the heat from the steam pipes that crossed the utility corridor, they manufactured life vests and a 2-meter-wide by 4-meter-long rubber raft. To inflate it in the shortest possible time, they modified a small concertina musical instrument to use as a pressure bellows, and carved rudimentary oars using scrap wood from the workshop and loose screws. To gain the necessary hours of advantage before the official 7:15 a.m. count, they sculpted 3 hyper-realistic dummy heads. They used a homemade mixture of Lifebuoy brand soap, toothpaste, cement powder from construction sites, and molded toilet paper. Once dry, they painted them with skin tones taken from the art workshop paints and glued real hair meticulously collected from the prison barbershop floor. Placed strategically on the pillows with clothes piled under the blankets to simulate body volume, the visual deception was absolute for guards conducting night watches with flashlights. On the night of Monday, June 11, 1962, the most complex operation in penitentiary history went live. The lights of Alcatraz went out at 9:30 p.m. Morris and the Anglin brothers placed the dummies in their bunks and slipped through the narrow shafts. Alan West discovered to his horror that the cement he had used to disguise the edges of his grate had hardened too much during the last day, completely blocking his exit. By the time he managed to break the frame with a spoon, his companions had already left. Desperate and in tears, West had to return to his bunk and abort his escape, becoming the key witness the next morning for the FBI to understand the true scale of the operation. Meanwhile, the 3 fugitives reached the roof through the ventilation shaft. As they exited to the outside, around 2 in the morning, they caused a loud crash as a kitchen vent pipe broke, a noise that the tower guards heard perfectly, but negligently decided not to investigate, confusing it with the thermal expansion of the old heating pipes. Carrying the heavy canvas raft, the 3 men descended 15 meters down a kitchen drain pipe, climbed 2 barbed wire fences nearly 4 meters high, and reached the northeast coast of the island, near the power plant. There, protected by the darkness of the night and the thick San Francisco fog, they inflated the raft with a concertina, launched into the freezing waters, and vanished forever into mystery. The next morning's count unleashed massive panic in the Department of Justice. When a guard tried to wake Frank Morris by tapping on the bars, the dummy head rolled onto the floor, revealing the plot. The sirens of Alcatraz wailed with an intensity heard across the entire bay. One of the largest military and law enforcement manhunts in U.S. history was activated, involving the FBI, the Coast Guard, and Army helicopters. 2 days later, on June 14th, a search team located a wooden or floating near Angel Island. That same day, a wallet wrapped in hermetic plastic was found containing personal photographs, names, and addresses of the Anglin brothers' relatives. Days later, shreds of raincoat appeared on a beach near the Golden Gate Bridge and a deflated homemade life vest was found near the island itself. The FBI concluded officially in 1979 that the men had drowned in the bay before reaching land, arguing that desperate fugitives would never have left behind their most valuable personal and family effects. However, this is where the official version begins to crumble, and we enter hidden records and disturbing conspiracy theories. The first great mystery surrounds a stolen car. On the very night of the escape, a 1955 Chevrolet vehicle was stolen in the vicinity of Marin County, exactly where bay currents would have carried the raft if the fugitives had successfully crossed. 3 men matching the physical descriptions of Morris and the Anglins were spotted hours later at a roadside diner on Route 101. The FBI investigated this theft under a strict state secret but never included the report in public statements to avoid admitting to the press that the men had made landfall. The second piece of data from the investigation, which the government tried to silence for months, occurred on July 17, just over a month after the escape. The Norwegian cargo ship SS Norefjell spotted a body floating in the open ocean, 28 kilometers from the Golden Gate Bridge. The ship's captain noted in detail in the logbook that the corpse was wearing blue denim pants and a shirt identical to the official Alcatraz inmate uniform. However, San Francisco coroner Henry Turkle instantly dismissed the lead. He claimed it was medically impossible for a body to float after a month at sea and ridiculously suggested it was a local baker who had committed suicide by jumping from the bridge days prior. This controversy sparked a real forensic war. Medical examiners from neighboring counties harshly criticized Turkle, providing scientific studies proving that in the freezing, oxygen-depleted waters of the Pacific Ocean, a human body can slow decomposition, accumulate internal gases in tissues, and float perfectly after 30 days. Was that corpse Frank Morris, confirming the tragic end of the plan, or was it an official smokescreen? If we dive into the Anglin family circle, the leads point directly to successful survival. Throughout the 60s and 70s, the brothers' mother received a bouquet of exotic flowers with no signed card every single Christmas and Mother's Day, delivered by anonymous couriers who vanished before the police could intercept them. Furthermore, at the matriarch's funeral, 2 exceptionally tall women dressed in heavy black veils and exaggerated makeup stood at the back of the church, weeping silently. Several family attendees claimed under secrecy that beneath the female dresses hid the robust figures of John and Clarence Anglin, defying the FBI right under their noses. But the definitive proof that shook the foundations of federal agencies appeared in 2015. A childhood friend of the brothers, Fred Britzi, handed the family an authentic photograph taken at a remote farm in Brazil in 1975. The image shows two mature men with sunglasses of the era posing next to a huge tree in a tropical setting. The Anglin family authorized former U.S. Marshals to analyze the photograph using the most advanced 21st-century biometric facial recognition and bone structure algorithms. The result left investigators in shock. The algorithms determined a physical match of over 99% with the structural features of the Anglin brothers. Everything indicates that the expert freezing water swimmers managed to beat the bay currents, breach the Mexican border, and retire to enjoy their freedom in South America. As if that weren't enough, in 2013, San Francisco police received a mysterious handwritten letter that reactivated all international alarms. The message read textually, "My name is John Anglin. I escaped from Alcatraz in June 1962 with my brother Clarence and Frank Morris. I am 83 years old and in bad shape. I have cancer. Yes, we all made it that night, but barely." The letter continued, claiming Frank Morris passed away in 2008 under a fake identity and Clarence in 2011, offering to surrender to authorities in exchange for a short one-year sentence in prison to receive free medical treatment for his illness. The FBI analyzed the fingerprints and handwriting of the document for months, but the official technical conclusion was an ambiguous and inconclusive, cannot confirm nor deny. They never heard from the sender again. The escape from Alcatraz dealt a fatal blow to the pride of the American penitentiary system. 3 men armed with spoons, soap, and raincoats had proven that the rock was not impenetrable. Less than a year later, in March 1963, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy signed its permanent closure. The rock became a floating museum, a concrete monument that has inspired novels, the legendary 1979 Clint Eastwood film, academic investigations such as the definitive 2025 book by Carlos Cabezas Lopez, and even references in modern popular culture, like in the Marvel series Loki, where it is joked that the character of Casey is a temporal variant of Frank Morris himself trapped in time. And you, dear viewer of Jon Crimes, do you believe that Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers froze to death in the waters of the bay and their remains belong to the Norwegian cargo ship sightings? Or do you think the Brazil photo and the letters prove they pulled off the perfect feat? Leave us your reasoned opinion down below in the comments section, always maintaining the utmost respect for historical facts. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming massive forensic analyses of our dark chronicle. My name is Jon Crimes, and remember, there are no inescapable fortresses when the human mind decides to be free. Until the next file.